Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Casey and here on my channel we talk about personal growth, lifestyle, and personal finance. Today we're going to be talking about how to create and stick to a budget. So if you're interested in learning about budgeting, just keep watching. So I've decided to split this video up into 3 different sections. The first section is steps to create a budget. The second section is different budgeting methods. And the third section is how I personally budget my money. The first step in creating a budget is to understand your current financial situation. So for this step, I want you to print out 1 to 3 months of your financial statements, so your bank statements, your credit card statements, and just lay them out all in front of you. The second step is to calculate your average monthly income and average monthly expenses. So what you're going to do is, now that you have your bank statements out in front of you, you're going to go through those bank statements and tally up the inflows of money, so your income for those 3 months, and all your expenses for those 3 months. Then you're going to take the average of all your incomes for the 3 months and the average of all your expenses for the 3 months. This will give you your average monthly income and your average monthly expenses. So ideally, you want your average monthly income to be larger than your average monthly expenses. This means that you're in a surplus and you have extra money to use to put to other things like savings, investing, and so on. If your average monthly expenses are larger than your average monthly income, you need to do one of 2 things. Either you need to increase your income or you need to reduce your expenses. Step number 3 is to categorize your expenses. I would divide them into 2 different categories: your necessary and your optional expenses. So your necessary expenses are going to be your non-negotiables. So things like rent, utilities, car payment, gas, groceries, any bill that you have to pay in order to survive for the month. And then your optional things are going to be things like subscriptions, shopping, dining out, things that you could go without if you needed to. One tip is that when you're taking note of your necessary expenses, make sure to take note of the due date of them as well. This will help when we're planning out our budget to know when those things come out of our bank account. Number 4 is to determine your financial goals. So this could be a bunch of things. It could be paying off debt, investing in your Roth IRA, saving for a car, saving for a down payment on a home, really anything that you're interested in pursuing with your money. So once you have a list of all your financial goals, start putting numbers to those goals. I'd also recommend ranking these financial goals in order of importance. Depending on your budget, you might not have that much money to throw at these financial goals. So it's important that you keep in mind the things that are super important for right now, and then the other goals that you can get to later, you can focus on them at a different time. Also, another thing to note is that this step of financial goals is only applicable if your average monthly income is larger than your average monthly expenses. So if you are in the negative, so if you're spending more than you make, you need to really tackle that first. So figure out a way to up your income or decrease your expenses. And step number 5 is to pick a budgeting method and stick to it. So now we're going to move into the second section of this video where we talk about different methods of budgeting. So I'm going to list out a couple different types of budgeting methods, but do not feel like you are limited to these methods. If you have another way that works for you, or if you decide that you want to do a hybrid of these, budget that you should follow is the one that you're going to stick to. So the first budgeting method is the 50-30-20 rule. So the way that this works is you split up your money into 3 different categories: your needs, your wants, and your savings. Ideally, 50% of your money would go to your needs, 30% of your money would go to your wants, and 20% of your money would go to your savings. And this could also be like investments. This is probably one of the easiest budgeting methods just because it leaves a lot open for interpretation. So you could, my definition of what a need is could be different than what yours is, and your definition of a want could be different than what my definition of a want is. Another thing that you can do within this method is switch the 30 and 20% rule. So you could, instead of doing 30% wants and 20% savings, you could do 30% savings and 20% wants. The second budgeting method is the monthly conscious spending plan. And this is something that I learned from the book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. This book is actually like one of my favorite personal finance books, so I'll leave it down in the comments below because I really recommend it. So the way that the monthly conscious spending plan works is there are 4 categories for spending. You have your fixed expenses, your investments, your savings, and your guilt-free spending money. Ideally, your fixed expenses will take up 50 to 60% of your budget, your investments 10%, your savings goals 5 to 10%, and your guilt-free spending money 25 to 30%. So I really like this method because there's a little bit more wiggle room in that you can kind of determine what you want to spend your money on. And I also really like it because of the guilt-free spending money. So it is what it sounds like. It's money that you can spend guilt-free on whatever you want. One of the things I really like about I Will Teach You to Be Rich is that the book really focuses on creating a life and spending money on things that you find important. So where your ideal life or your ideal, place that you're striving to might be, to buy a house, someone else's dream life could be to live in a big city and, spend their money on drinks and going out. So it's not putting any like good or bad labels on types of things that you can spend your money on. It's just figuring out what's important to you and spending your money on those things. The third budgeting method is the budget by paycheck method. So this is popularized by the YouTuber The Budget Mom, and she actually has 2 workbook options if you're really interested in this method. And the premise is that you create a different budget for every single paycheck you have. So most people get paid 2 times a month. So with this method, you would create a budget for your first paycheck. So everything that falls within that time frame, maybe it's the 1st through the 15th, and then your second paycheck, maybe it's the 15th to the 30th. You create a whole nother budget for expenses that come out during that time and money that you're going to spend during that time. This method could be really good if you have a lot of expenses that come out on random days, or if you get paid like more than 2 times a month. So maybe you get paid every single week, or you get paid like ad hoc. This is a great way to plan out those specific paychecks and make sure that your paycheck is lasting you until your next paycheck. So these last 2 methods are kind of like supplemental systems. So the first one is the cash envelope system, which is where you use cash for all of your variable spending. So variable spending categories are categories that fluctuate a little bit. So they're things like groceries, gas, different types of bills, like your phone bill might be a little different every single month. And this is where, for those variable categories, you budget out an amount. So say you budget out $100 for groceries. You then go get out $100 in cash and put that in that cash envelope, and you only use the cash within that envelope for that budget category. So it really helps you to conceptualize, like in a very real way, that I have budgeted $100 and I only have $100 to spend. And that is shown through the $100 bill that I have. That is the only thing I'm allowed to use for that category. And the second supplemental method is sinking funds. So sinking funds are a term that's used for saving up for larger expenses in small increments. So this could be for things like year-long subscriptions, so like Amazon subscription, or it could be like, say you have your car registration every 6 months. It could be you saving whatever that cost is a little bit each month up until that purchase, in order to avoid having a large expense in a month that completely throws off your budget. So now that I've shared different budgeting methods, we're going to move into section 3 and talk about how I budget my money. So I use a combination of 3 different methods. So my main budgeting method is the monthly conscious spending plan. So the way that I use it is that every month I categorize all of my expenses into those 4 categories. So fixed costs, investments, savings, and guilt-free spending money. Once I've established those different percentages, then I move that over into my second budgeting method, which is the budget by paycheck method. So I kind of take the information from the monthly conscious spending plan and put it into a budget for each paycheck. So I start off with how much money I'm making that paycheck, and then deduct all of the things that come out during that time while using my monthly conscious spending plan as kind of like my guide. And then lastly, my third budgeting method that I use is sinking funds. So I kind of infuse sinking funds into the monthly conscious spending plan by putting them in my savings category. So my savings accounts within my savings category include my emergency fund and then all my sinking funds. So things like travel, house down payment, car maintenance, gifts, stuff like that. So one thing I want to point out is the best budgeting method for you is the one that you're going to stick to. And sticking to a budget comes with trial and error. So for example, I started out using the 50-30-20 rule and realized that it was a little bit too broad for me and wanted something with a little bit more specificity. So then I moved into the monthly conscious spending plan. And then I realized that while that was better than the first method, I still wanted some more clarity about when things were coming out of my bank account. So then I switched over to doing a hybrid of the monthly conscious spending plan and the budget by paycheck method. So this whole process is trial and error. Try something, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, pivot, try something else. And honestly, everything within budgeting is trial and error. So just try something, start, and see where it takes you. So now we're going to move into some tips on how to stick to your budget. So the first tip is to check on your progress regularly. So when it comes to budgeting, I'd really recommend having some way to track your budget. So either using a plain notebook, a budget planner, a spreadsheet, a budgeting software like Mint, or You Need a Budget. Literally anything, whatever works for you, just some type of way that you can track your budget and have it in one place so that you can, budget, look at how you actually did, reconcile those things, and look back if you want to for your past budgets and how you did in the past. So once you have that way of tracking your budget, I'd recommend checking in with your budget on a regular basis. So that could be daily, every week, every month. I recommend somewhere between daily and weekly just because a lot can happen in 7 days. You just want to keep an eye on your bank accounts and on your money. The second tip is to automate your savings and or your investments. So this means that every single month you automate your deposits from your checking account into your savings account or from your checking account into your investment accounts so that you do not have to do it manually. I've noticed that when you wait to do things manually, the chances that you actually do them lessen because you could forget, or maybe you spent a little bit more on your shopping budget than you wanted to, so you're just gonna keep some of that savings and make up for it that way. Where that may sound like it's okay, it can really slow you down in your progress of reaching your financial goals. So I recommend automating those transfers and have it to where right when your paycheck comes in, money for your savings and your investments goes out right away and you technically never see that money. So this will just make sure that you're steadily marching towards your goals and there's little room for hiccups or errors. So my last tip is to use apps or other types of softwares to make things a little easier. So I use the Mint app on top of my normal budgeting, and I really like it because Mint has notifications built into it. And a lot of times Mint will notice things that I haven't noticed myself. So they'll notice a fee, or they'll notice that I'm spending more in a certain category than I did in the previous month. And it's just really nice to have another thing checking up on you and making sure that you're making progress towards your goals. So there we have it, how to create and stick to a budget. Let me know down in the comments below what type of methods that you use for budgeting and if you have any additional tips. Also, I'd love for you to let me know if you want me to create like actual budgeting videos in the future. So I showed a little bit about how I budget in this video, but I could, budget with you on a weekly or monthly basis. So let me know down in the comment section if you'd be interested in that type of content. Before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!